in the United States on charges he duped investors. According to the charges, Adani Group executives concealed that the company's huge solar energy project on the subcontinent was being facilitated by an alleged bribery scheme amounting to millions of dollars. The latest development leaves egg on the faces of top government officials, among them President William Ruto, who before announcing the cancellation of their deals had earlier on vouched for the Indian firm.
Indian conglomerate Adani Group and other executives were indicted in New York on Wednesday by U.S. prosecutors for their alleged roles in years-long multi-billion-dollar bribery and fraud scheme involving plans to develop a major solar power plant. According to the United States Department of Justice, Adani, a key ally of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and 7 other executives, including his nephew Sagar Adani, promised more than $250 million in bribes to Indian government officials to secure solar energy contracts expected to yield $2 billion in profits. Authorities say Adani personally met with an Indian government official to advance the scheme, which took place between 2020 and 2024. The defendants frequently met and allegedly discussed the bribe scheme, including evidence on several phones. According to a media statement signed by the firm's spokesperson, the Adani Group will seek all possible legal recourse to deal with the issue. The group says it has always upheld and is committed to maintaining the highest standards of governance, transparency, and regulatory compliance across all jurisdictions. The statement goes ahead to reassure Adani Group stakeholders, partners, and employees. The Indian conglomerate runs various subsidiaries, including Adani Airport Holdings, Adani Energy Solutions, Adani Green Energy, Adani Ports, and Adani Power. The Indian firm is also accused of various issues across the globe, top among them corruption, tax evasion, stock price manipulation, and extensive accounting fraud. The impact of the allegations, which resurfaced more than a year after U.S. short seller Edinburgh accused the Adani Group of stock manipulation and accounting fraud, was swiftly felt across the conglomerate. On Thursday, shares in the group's publicly listed companies dropped between 10 and 20%. The news of the businessman being indicted has been received by jubilation by thousands of Kenyans on social media, who for many months now called for the cancellation of the Adani deals in the country, citing opaqueness and claims of corruption. Despite public outcry from Kenyans, state officials led by President William Ruto did not heed to the calls. Before cancelling the deal in his State of the Nation address today, President Ruto had earlier on expressed confidence in the Indian firm in helping the country achieve its goal of wiring national electric power grid without burdening Kenyans. His sentiments were echoed by Raila Odinga and several cabinet secretaries.
Adani Group are investing in the transmission line. Their money, 95 billion. We would have otherwise gone to borrow that money, burden the people of Kenya. We will pay for that transmission line using a wheeling charge that has been negotiated. And it is important for us as a nation to appreciate that a partnership between public and the private sector gives us a win-win outcome.
This is a reputable company, in my knowledge. This company actually has done very many PPP projects. We visited a project that was done through a PPP by Adani in a place called Mundra. This was a marsh land next to the sea, 5,000 hectares of land. It was granted to the Adanis by the government of Mr. Modi. They drained the swamp and constructed a deep-sea port.
Ian Keitani, K24 TV, Nairobi.
Honorable Eddie Okech, your party leader or your former party leader, that is Raila Odinga, says it is a reputable company, white as cotton. In other words, today Adani has been cancelled by President Ruto. Once again I ask, is this an egg on Raila's face? And as well Opiyo Wandayi, the Energy Cabinet Secretary, who by the way, yesterday appeared before a committee And on the same day, President Ruto comes and cancels the Adani. First of all, are they even in good communication in this broad-based government?
I cannot speak to the communication between the president and his CS because as far as I know, in as much as there is this broad-based government, I'm also a legislature. So I remain independent in terms of my oversight role over the executive. So whatever is happening in the executive is to the executive.
Do you read a communication breakdown between...
I can only analyze. I can only analyze what Opio and I might have been trying to do. Because remember this Adani deal, if you look at Ketraco alone, there was a commitment of 96 billion. If you look at the actually KAA, the Kenya Airports Authority, the deal was coming to about 238 billion. Now, in my own, corporate culture and understanding, and I think that my sister here as an economist will tell you, for you to have that kind of deal, and for you to do the diligence processes in those kind of deals, for you to actually go through the process of that deal, there has to be some prior commitment in terms of resources that must have been engaged there. And those resources is on both sides. It could have been from Adani itself, but also from because it's a partnership. So what I'm reading from the CS is that, and I might be wrong on this, but I think that there is some public funds that must have been spent in the process of engaging Adani. That perhaps the CS, where I sit, even if I was the one who was sitting there, that value for money would only have been achieved if the projects would have been done by Adani. So then, before cancellation of that kind of a deal, it means then that you must be able to account for that kind of investment that has been done in pre-engagement and diligence processes that perhaps the CS was struggling with not being able to let go. Because I read the CS's statement that despite all these other things that we're talking about, this deal, we will continue with it. So that is the context in which I take the CS's conversation in terms of what could have been the sunk cost that the country is going to face as a result of having engaged in it up to now. And even now, after this cancellation, as a legislature, I would want the government to tell us how much money has been used, public funds have been used in this engagement so far. How will we get the value for that money? Is it lost? And if it is lost, who must be held accountable? That is something as a legislator I must fight for. On the issue of Raila, that's what I was coming to. I don't think it was sanitizing Adani. I think that it was giving the context of what other projects has Adani done prior to this kind of engagement. And as I've said, if you take that soundbite alone out of the context of the entire Raila speech, in that speech, if you go back to all of it, you find that Raila Odinga was very clear that despite the fact that Adani has done big deals in India, the ones that he was mentioning, that then makes them a competitive, commercially viable, reputable company that can be able to uptake the kind of project that they are trying to take in Kenya, he was very clear that on this particular deals with Adani and Kenya, there is no transparency. And the issue of transparency is something that Raila talked about so much in that speech. And he went back and showed us a number of places that the mutilation of the PPP Act that was put in place in 2006, the kind of mutilation that law has faced, and the reality that we are facing with lack of transparency in these PPPs have been, in that speech, Raila strongly called for proper transparency between the government and the people on Adani. I think that's the bottom line.
Came amidst concerns from Kenyans after a whistleblower by the name Nelson Amenya, who is now considered as a hero and a lone crusader who single-handedly exposed Adani. Could it be proper then for Raila Odinga to advise the government to first of all look into such whistleblowers' dossier before implementing such projects?
It did. I'm telling you to go and watch
Suspense first until, because Adani deal was signed for the energy.
It did.
Which Opio Wandai leads.
Raila Odinga was very clear, and I was actually in that press statement, right? I was in that room. Raila Odinga was very clear that the Adani deal wasn't transparent.
Well,
and
did he come
for
out to call out the government after the Adani Energy deal was signed?
On the transparency side, yes, Raila called out.
After the Adani Energy was signed?
This entire deal had been put in place. It was not only just the energy deal. It was a number of, in fact, even in Shah, there is a hand of Adani in Shah. And Raila was clear that all the deals that the government wants to do with Adani, they has to be proper transparency, not only to us legislatures or the people in government, but it was very clear that the people must know the nature of these contracts, must know the depth of these contracts, must know those deals in details.
Well,
that was the bone of contention between Raila and the government.
Well, Ruth, Adani deal being cancelled by President William Ruto, the same president who defended it. You've also listened to him, just trying to justify why we need the 96 billion or 95 billion Kenya shillings for the Adani Energy, for the K24 transmission lines. And on the whole issue of how procurement of such deals should be done, government has different approaches. For the money printing deal, they cited the approach to the classified deal. In this one, they said it was the privately initiated proposals. But the due diligence, must we await for countries like the US to enact one for us to be able to move and cancel these deals?
Thank you, Chacha. I'm looking at the whole issue of Adani. Adani did not just start now. We can clearly tell it started way early, maybe even early into the coming in of this government, and it was more pronounced when the broad-based government came in. I have come here many times and talked about PPPs and how important they are to a country. However, I just want to talk about something, especially on the attitude that was there 3 months ago, 4 months ago. And the problem was not how, the problem was one, how Adani deal came to be known by the public. That was not the right thing. And I've come here many times and said this government does not communicate. And whenever it does not communicate, there is a problem, because some of this very important information cannot only be brought about by, say, whistleblowers, that the public is knowing some of these important deals, especially where billions of money, like the power thing of 95 billion is concerned. When you go to Shah, because it has been mentioned that Adani hand is in Shah, we saw a whole issue of controversy about the system of Shah, the same system that could not be able to onboard patients, and as a result of the graying area of transition from one organization that was not seen to have a lot of issues to a new one, and a complicated system that made a lot of people lose their lives.
In fact, NHIF was to upgrade their systems with 700 million.
Yes.
However, with now maybe Shah being in the picture,
yeah,
the amount shot up to more than 100 billion. 100
billion, actually 104 billion. And the main problem was not how those things are. The main problem is that the cries of Kenyans were not heard. The sentiments of Kenyans were not listened. And the continuation, and actually the last thing that ever, or the best thing that ever happened, is how the churches and the bishops have come to say, this is not right, take it or leave it. And one of the things we know, we cannot fight religious leaders in this country, because by the time they're coming, I'm sure their integrity has reached to a point that they're outrightly saying this is not right. So the problem is not government, is not anyone bringing their proposals and PPPs being taken over, but the process. And especially because yesterday's speech outlined the major thing that should have been done 10 months ago in terms of, just let me finish, Chacha, just in terms of transparency and the fact that we wanted other option, the country wanted other option apart from Adani. What other options of proposals have ever been brought to the government? The fact that yesterday there was disconnect in terms of communication, you can tell there is a problem with the right hand and the left hand. And where is the Mwananchi where the left hand and the right hand are not communicating? And those are the main things that we want addressed.
Honorable Geoffrey Ruku, President Ruto cites that, according to the new information that he has gotten from partner states, and basically attributing his decision to the indictment of Adani in the US rather than listening to Kenyans? Was it Kenyans in the play, or President Ruto is a puppet of the US?
The government of Kenya must fulfill the commitment, both international commitments as well as local commitments. And when I'm talking about international commitment, I'm talking about international liabilities. We have huge debt which we have to pay. Once we pay this debt, we are left with a little amount of money to take care of our local expenditure or recurrent expenditure. After taking care of our recurrent expenditure, we have to do development projects. This development project, there are 3 ways. One, we borrow money more, and already we have reached the maximum of borrowing to GDP. Or we get into PPPs, monies which are not borrowed. Because our revenues which we are raising as a nation, all these we are committing to paying the debts and the current expenditure. So PPPs will solve quite a number of challenges which the government of the day is facing.
But
in terms of the development.
PPPs is more of borrowing in kind. At the end of the day, you're going to pay.
No, you're not going to pay. There's no taxpayers' money, which it is the project which will repay itself. Because the project is earning money. For instance, KWS is a public institution, isn't it? Today, probably KWS may say, we want to build huge conference centers in Kenya for promotion of tourism. But they don't have money to pay, to build such a huge conference center. So they may end up into PPP with someone with money.
Well, so
but
Kenyans or the US?
Listen, let me explain the point. Because it's good for Kenyans to understand. Once you build the conference center, it will pay itself. And probably the money which KWS is getting from the tourism, some of that money will go to settling the deal.
My initial question was, is it Kenyans or the US in the play?
Chacha, if you disrupt me, I will not be able to explain why PPPs are important.
My question was in black and white.
So PPPs are very important for the growth of the nation in terms of executing project. We have one PPP, which is expressway. We are paying once we are using the.
That's well noted, and the point is home.
But you know,
back to my question, Honorable Ruko.
Yes.
Kenyans or the US in the play?
There is information, as I said from the starting of this discussion, information which has resurfaced that this company has been involved in shoddy dealings in the United States of America. Investigations have been done. They have been indicted. Before any person or any company, any group is indicted in the United States of America, serious investigation will be done, and there is evidence to that effect.
Well,
therefore, any nation or any company dealing with such kind of a company, you have to call off all the deals which were in place.
Honorable Eddie, the ramifications of cancellation of such deals, will taxpayers' money be used to deal with the repercussions of Ruto's move?
And that is why I was very honest when I said that when I look at Opiyo Wandayi, who is a minister in charge of that particular ministry, that was one of the ministries that signed these deals, will he speak as a politician or as a technocrat? And I think that, you know, when this government started, it was struggling. And ODM, fraternity chose to send some experts. And I'm very proud of Opiyo Wandayi because Opiyo Wandayi behaved as an expert in yesterday's communication. Because one thing you must know about PPPs is that the procurement procedures for PPPs, the agreements drawal, the diligence process for PPPs takes longer than a normal government project that is done where government has money.
Maybe where money has already been used.
Exactly.
What I'm asking here
I'm going
is
to
the
that.
compensation.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. So when that stretch of procurement process, stretch of diligence process goes on, and the stretch of signing of those contracts takes such long time, there is what we will call a sunk cost, an investment that must be done by both sides. And on the side of government, it is public money being used. So when you cancel those deals, okay, then that money can be lost.
So already there is money that has been used?
There is money that has
possibly,
been used, yes.
And now, after the cancellation?
Yes, after the cancellation, after the cancellation, number one is that money that was used in the entire procurement process, the entire diligence process, can be lost. And an expert like Wandai cannot just wake up and say we are cancelling this deal and losing that money, because it's not his money. Yeah. It's not Ruto's money. Even the president, even after cancellation, saying that we have cancelled the Adani deal is an easier thing. But he holds the country explanation of what happens with the money that has been lost. Then number two, remember that this was a need-based investment. Now we're talking about post-cancellation. The need-based investment metrics must also be done in terms of what then happens to these projects going forward. And that is why my sister here was talking about, why didn't we have a competitive process where we've got other alternative investors who could have come in place? Because there is also value lost when there is no proper explanation of what happens with the need gaps that informed this kind of PPP. So they, as a parliament, and Ruko, I can tell him for a fact that in the current arrangement, there's no opposition versus those in power. Our constitution does not allow that. We've got majority and minority in parliament, and the entire parliament has got responsibility to oversight the executive. Ruko and I must now go to the House and demand from government to explain to Kenyans what then happens to those investments that have been done. And then number two, what happens to the need gap that is going to be there, because it's going to take a long time to be able to come up with another PPP that will address these particular needs in a post-cancellation.
Ruth, consequences of President Ruto cancelling the deal at a time that the energy one was already up and running, the JKA one was maybe being processed. Usually, for one to cancel such a deal, maybe it will cost taxpayers billions of shillings in terms of compensation, factoring already the deal was more than 200 billion. So what's the possible figure that we're talking about in terms of compensation? Because it was not mutually agreed.
Maybe just to even further the conversation from where our senator is coming from. At what point is sunk costs supposed to have been spent? Yeah. You know, sunk cost will be spent in a deal that already has been agreed upon. Yeah. Maybe at this point in time we can say the 100 billion of SHIF or Shifa, is it Shifa or now is it Taifa or whatever? Taifa, you know, can we call that as because it is the most prominent right now? You know,
that communication thing is still a problem with the current government.
Is that, yeah. So is that what we are trying to now say is sunk costs? Or at what point, if, because the president has said the government was not using its money, these guys were coming to bring their money. So does it also mean that there is no sunk cost? Because if there are, I'll be very worried, because it is at the expense of other very important things that needs to be done. An example of the 30 billion saying that the president said that are going to pay some of the former liabilities of NHIF, and today he's going to pay 3.7 billion. 3.7 billion. You know, yeah. So you know, and how are we sure that that is going to be paid? But I think my problem is the fact that we are not dealing with the things that needs to be dealt with very fast. Of course, yes, maybe Shifa will be dealt with because it is an outcry to the nation. But what about the 700, 800 billion of pending bills that has not been paid, that are making that are actually making the economy dead? You know, what is going to happen with all those issues? Right. Because I want to say, Chacha, the government cannot run its affair based on what is being pointed out. Because the whole issue of Adani was agreed because it was agreed. Actually, the main problem with Kenyan is that because it is an underdeal. It was actually no one even right now knows the extent they were coming to to help.
So in other words, we risk losing billions
yes.
of shillings in terms of
Yeah, and I want to give you an example because Honorable Roko has mentioned about the issue of expressway. If you can remember the whole issue about expressway even before it was built, more than 10 years time, people knew expressway was coming up. And actually, everyone would agree that the road, actually the way to the airport needs to be decongested because of other things that had happened. So there has to be a business case or justification when some of these PPP happen. And I want to point out and say, for example, the whole issue about the 95 billion right now, Chacha, have we, about the transmission line, has anyone, maybe the legislators can help us with knowing the benefits that some of the main or immediate benefit that the transmission lines are going to, and how that is going to translate to the common Kenyans, considering right now the economy is at the lowest, and Kenyans need to turn around their lives, daily lives.
We'll take a short commercial break at this juncture. When you come back, I'll be playing the bite of the Treasury Cabinet Secretary as far as the compensation or the ramifications of cancellation of this deal. Also, Honorable Ruku will get a chance to put his voice on it. We take a short commercial break. Keep the conversation going via social media platforms at K24 TV, at Joel Chacha as well on SMS, and WhatsApp numbers on the bottom of your screens. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.